Well, I've been in the order since 1955. I was born in India. I lived there 10 years of my life. Then we came to England, and I lived in Bedford for 1 year until I went to our Seraphic school near Lancaster for 4 years. Then when the school broke up, I went to Beulah Hill in London and taught by the De La Salle brothers. Excellent. I did enjoy my life there. And then I entered the order in 55. I was pleased that I was thrown immediately after ordination into giving missions and retreats. And I've had many happinesses through that, people coming back to the church. And I've seen how that has evolved even. Giving retreats, especially here at Bantassif. I introduced Sunday retreats, and we'd get from the beginning, first Sunday in May to the last Sunday of September, around 200 people coming. And that was a good experience. My happiest years in the order, I would say, was when I was stationed in Uddingston, which is just outside Glasgow. I found the people so very friendly, absolutely, that it was the only place I ever shed a tear when I had to leave, thinking of all your friends. I learned to drive in Scotland, and I was taught, believe it or not, by no other than the driving instructor who taught all the Celtic players. I've made some great friends, and I've enjoyed being a Capuchin. The first friar I met was out in India, Father Luke. And how I got to know him was, it was the custom in our family on our birthdays to go to the priest, because we went to daily mass, and Dad would say, go to the priest and ask for his blessing. I had served Father Luke's mass, and after mass I said to him, Father, it's my birthday today, will you give me your blessing? He said, fancy that, it's my birthday too. And he gave me 8 annas, which was a lot of money for a little lad in those days. And ever since then, I always admired him. And in fact, one day I was serving his mass, and just before communion, he turned around to me and he said, do you want to go to Holy Communion? I said, oh, yes, please, Father. So what he did, I could claim to be one of the first ones who have had communion under both kinds. He took the little particle in the chalice and he gave it to me. Yes, I remember Father Luke very well. And later on, when I was guardian here, who should be in my community was no other than Father Luke. And I got on very well with his brother James, because he was my prefect of discipline at Wisedale, where I was at our Seraphic school for at least 3 years, I'd say. And then he went to Eversley Road when we were at Beulah Hill, and he was again in charge of us there. And the other priest I remember so well is Father Cassian. I looked upon him as being a very wise man. In fact, I could say, the other friars may not agree with me, but I think he was probably the brainiest friar we ever had, very clever. And he said things to me that helped me through life. I remember the first time we were in choir and he was standing next to me, and he said, do you know, Marcel, he said, you've got a lovely voice. Well, later on, when I loved singing, I decided to make, in fact, believe it or not, 43 CDs. And it was all due to that saying, because I thought, well, if he thinks that of me, I'll give it a go. And it was Father Pascal, who was the provincial at the time. And I asked him if I could make a record in those days. He said, will it sell? I said, yes. I said, you give me £1,000 to make, no, £1,000 I think it was, yes, £1. I can't remember the amount. I said, and I'll give you double the money in a year's time, which is what I did. I was singing for the starving. And ever since then, almost every year, some years I made 2. And it was all through what Cassian said, Francis, you've got a lovely singing voice. And also I remember once during my studies, I had a good memory in those days. And the first thing we had to study at the age of 18 was metaphysics. It's the science of being insofar as it is being. I used to think, what on earth does that mean? So thank God I had a good memory. I made my notes and I remembered these about 15 pages of it. And I said, it's there now. And three weeks before the exam, I'll pull it out of my memory. 3 weeks came, it had gone. And you start panicking, and I thought, I'll never learn it all now. So I went to Cassian. I said, Father, you may think because he was our director. I said, you may think I'm being lazy or haven't tried. I said, because when we have our exams, when it comes to philosophy, I'm going to fail. I told him, he said, you know what's wrong with you, Francis? He says, you can't stand failure. And that meant a lot to me, and it helped me to realize that. I felt after that, do your best. And if the result is a failure, you can't do more than that. And it did help me through life. When I think what our early friars did, the imagination they must have had, I mean, building the Calvary, this friary, I'm so happy here, and I'm going to be literally heartbroken when I have to close the door and go to Chester. I know it's God's will for me to leave Pantasif and go to Chester. My first year of ordination, after ordination, I was put in charge of the cemetery. And you'll never believe it. All we had was a sickle you couldn't sharpen it. It was so hard, the metal. And shears that you couldn't grasp. When you did that, you pulled the grass out instead of cutting it. And so what I did was, I managed to get a sickle, light, thin, and I could cut it. And fortunately, I said to myself, if I pull up all the curbs so that it can just be grassed over, it'll make it, for generations to come, so much easier to look after the cemetery. I can literally say I've saved thousands of hours in that cemetery. And the curbs you see around the pathways, a lot of them are from the graves which I pulled up. So that was the first thing I enjoyed doing. The second thing was the Sunday retreats, as I said. I enjoyed that, to get 200 people. It was a miracle how it all happened. We had a lady called, memory's going for names, but she did all the cooking. And these 200 people came, and we began our first retreat in 1976, that beautiful summer, where it hardly rained for about 3 months. She did all the cooking, and all we charged was £1.50. And people had, when they arrived, tea and biscuits. Then after the talk, they had their lunch, which consisted of roast veal, a sweet, and coffee. Then we went up to Calvary to do the Stations of the Cross and came down, and they would have a cup of tea and a scone, and then they'd have sandwiches in the evening with a scone again, and tea and biscuits and all that. And all we charged was £1.50. But I had a way of getting the money back, because I had a grand draw of £1,000, which we had a big garden party every year. The best one we ever had was the first one we started with Kevin Keegan. Well, I said to the committee, I said, you produce the goods, I'll produce the celebrity. And I went to Kevin's house 3 times. It was only the 3rd time I plucked up courage and went in. And I told him I was a copite. Used to go to the matches at the weekend. And he said, now what can I do for you, Father? But first his dogs, his Dulux dogs, nearly killed me. Because as soon as I arrived, they saw me and they charged me. Oh gosh, I was so frightened, I fell on the ground. And thank God Kevin was coming around, otherwise I wouldn't be here to tell you the tale. And he was so angry with his dogs. He said, "Come in, Father." I said, "Kevin, I know you're a busy man, and I don't want to take up your time." "Forget it, Father." He says, "You're coming in and having a cup of tea." I had a cup of tea. And then his wife came in and said, "You'll never believe it, Father's a copite." And then he said, "What can I do for you?" I said, "Kevin, would you open our garden fete?" He said, "Jean," his wife, "Oh, am I free?" "Yes, you are." He said, "I'll be there." He turned up, and when I told the committee, they said, "Who have you got?" I said, "Kevin Keegan." They said, "Who is he?" I said, "He's the king of Merseyside. I can tell you this now." I said, "There's going to be about 20 coaches from Liverpool coming to our garden party." And at that time, they used to have it just round a little place, about 5 or 6 stalls. I said, "We're going to be the laughing stock when we've got Kevin." So what I did, I got in the car and I went to all the marketplaces around here. Holywell, Prestatyn, Mould, Ruthin, Flint, you name it, I went there. And I just told them, would you like a table? We're having Kevin Keegan to open our garden party. Well, they turned up trumps in a big field not far away. They just took over. It was just the market stalls. People thought it was all ours. It wasn't. And thank God, everything worked out well and we made £15,000. When I was a novice here in 1955, we had a friar called Father Edmund. He was my novice master, and he was brutally like Friar Tuck. He was over 6 foot and big man, but a very kind and loving man. And he was deacon for Good Friday service. And we had to go, the acolyte and I had to go into the sacristy and pick up our candles, and he would pick up the cross that was veiled. And he picked it up. And the 2 novices looked at each other and say, this is one of his pious moments. And he brought the cross down through the sacristy door. We led the way, looking at each other. Then we came into the church. There was another door, put the cross down, and in he went. But he didn't know this. Father Aelred, he was brother at the time, he was the sacristan. And he said, I have to put fresh oil into the sanctuary lamp. Where shall I leave it? Can't leave it in the sacristy. Someone's bound to knock it over. The best place is leave it where it is. So he cleaned the sanctuary lamp, put the oil in, left it up there. And in those days, you never interfered or touched. The novice master was like holy, like God. And Declan and I, the 2 novices, we could see his cross was going to hit the sanctuary lamp. Nowadays, we'd have stopped him. But in those days, no. He hit the sanctuary lamp, and you have never seen the amount of oil that fell on his head, onto his habit and vestments. Broken glass everywhere. And to this day, it's been one of the most humorous things I can remember. Another humorous thing was, we used to say office in the choir behind the altar. And we had one brother, Angelus, he was, another novice. We used to have the big psalter, and on one side were the psalms, and on the other side were the hymns. And they had a leather piece with a brass tongue at the bottom to keep the pages in order. And when we turned over from the hymn to the psalms, he would swing this over. And there used to be a brother Leonard. Lovely old man he was. Dead now, happy memory. And there he was kneeling, and this thong used to hit him on the back of his head. I mean, it would break my skull in 2. He just went boom, and back again. That was another humorous thing. When I was a young priest here, my first year as a priest, the guardian here said to me, or said to all of us, he said, we've got to build a crib. Who'd do it? No one volunteered. He said, you'll do it, pointing to me. And I am no good that way, no good at all. So he said, I want you to do it, Francis. I said, Father, you've picked the wrong man. You've picked the wrong man. So Declan was a good friend to me, another novice. I said, will you give me a hand? So we got all the pieces of the crib together, and I put them up. He said, and he told us before, he said, I want a Botticelli crib. Well, I'd never seen a Botticelli crib in my life. So when he saw it, he said, oh, I didn't want that one. So we undid it all, did another one. I didn't want that one. So after this, I happened to be this 3 toilets here. Adrian was in the last one. I didn't realize the Guardian was in the middle one. And I was in this one, and I said to Adrian, Adrian, I'm fed up with this Guardian, absolutely fed up. I told him I couldn't do it. And he says he wanted the Botticelli crib. I've done my best, and he doesn't like it. And he was listening to this. I said, Adrian, are you listening to me? You're not talking to me. And he knew the Guardian was there. So anyway, the Guardian came to me afterwards, and he said, look, Francis, he said, you do it as you want it. But he did explain that the Botticelli crib always had a slanting roof. So all I did was to get a stool where you put your hand in and move it. I stuck a piece of wood in it, put some ivy around it, got a piece of cardboard, sewn in some straw, put it at the top. I had Mary, Joseph on that side, baby Jesus in the middle, and I had a light facing the 3 of them, and that was my crib. And when they wrote it up in the Franciscan Annals, they said, this here, we have had a most unusual crib built for us at Bantassaf.